I was born on a snowy December day, and not much was strange about my birth. Well, except for the day. I was born on Christmas, the greatest gift my parents ever received to hear my dad tell it. But that wasn't the case for the rest of the town, because from the moment I came out I was ostracized. I was put in a different ward than the other babies, and no nurse really wanted to look after me, which my dad caused more than one fight with the staff over. But I really don't blame them. The town was one of the most religious in the country, had more churches than stores, and that made them superstitious. When I was brought home, the family dog wouldn't go near me. In fact, the poor thing cowered in the corner anytime I was in the same room. He died when I was 3. Dad said he was just old, but I'm not too sure about that. I think he died because of me. We never got another pet, which I hate it because I love animals. They just don't love me back. I never saw much of my extended family. Even both my grandparents wouldn't travel across town to come see me. My birthdays were just my parents. And while everyone else was out with family and friends, we stayed holed up in our little house. Those were some of my favorite memories. Those Christmases and birthdays when I was little. I ate lots of good food that my parents brought me, and had the attic all to myself on Christmas night. When school started, things got worse. I wasn't bullied or made fun of. I was just kept at a distance. No one talked to me. No one paid any attention to me, other than to give me a dirty look. I quickly felt like a ghost in the hallways. I could miss classes without issue because I think my teachers were relieved when I didn't show up. I don't blame them either. But it wasn't my fault. I didn't choose to be born on the 25th, it's just the way it worked out. I made my first real friend when I was 13. My mom had gone into the drugstore to pick up some prescriptions. I wasn't allowed inside. The owner hated me and made it very clear that I wasn't ever to come in. The alleyway between the drugstore and a lawyer's office became my playground. It had been snowing since earlier that morning, and the alley was like a winter wonderland. I made snowballs and did some target practicing using an old painted sign that hung on the side of the lawyer's office. It advertised some junk food with a goofy looking boy in the corner. My best shot hit the boy right between the eyes and I gave a hearty laugh.
Nice shot.
A voice called, and I turned to see a girl bundled up in a heavy maroon jacket that reached down to her knees and a green scarf. She had a red knitted hat on and pulled down so that all I could see of her face was her eyes and a rosy nose. Her eyes squinted at me in a smile.
You play baseball? You have a good arm.
No, I said. I looked around the rest of the alley, worried that someone would see us. Can I do something for you? She shrugged and bent down to make a snowball of her own.
I'm just bored,
she said and tossed the snowball. It hit just below mine.
I hate coming here.
Where?
To my grandpa's.
She said with a nod towards the drugstore.
He's so boring, and he and my dad just want to drink. Don't get me started on the boys here.
Her brows went down, and her eyes to slits.
Tricks won't let me play in their snowball fight because I'm a girl.
Don't know if it's because of that, I said, and she canted her head at me. They don't let me play either.
Why not? Like I said, you can throw pretty good.
If you lived around here, you'd know why, I said, and tossed another snowball.
You murder someone? Because if so, I know a few others you can do the same to.
Nope. Never killed anyone. Thought about it, but never got around to it. She laughed a little, and her breath came out in a white cloud.
That's too bad. What's your name?
Gregory, I said, and turned to face her. You?
Charlotte?
She held out her hand, and we shook.
What do you do for fun around here?
Mostly just hang out at home, to be honest.
Boring,
she said, and spun on her heel. She went over to a trash can and brushed away the snow on the lid before sitting down.
You can't be staying inside all the time, can you? Oh, I go nuts.
I shrugged. Not very popular around here. You probably shouldn't even be talking to me. They'll start hating you too.
Oh Oh no! A bunch of bumpkins won't like me? Whatever should I do?
She said, and laughed. It was the most I had ever heard someone laugh around me.
They can all go gurgle sewer water for all I care what they think. Doesn't seem to be anything wrong with you either, so I care even less about their opinion.
Thanks. I guess.
Gregory?
My mom called, and I turned to see her at the mouth of the alley. She had 2 bags in hand and just stared at me as if Charlotte wasn't there.
What are you doing?
Talking?
Okay, well, I got what I needed, so come on. Time to head home.
She said and walked off. Meanwhile, I turned to Charlotte. Sorry, I gotta go.
No worries. You live around here? We should go do something, like skating or something. I'm gonna go crazy if I have to hang out by myself anymore.
Yeah, I said, and she walked with me to the end of the alley. I pointed down the street. Go 2 blocks down, make a right on Merchant, and my house is the 5th up on the left. It has green siding, and my dad is putting up a ton of lights. You can't miss it. She grinned.
Great. Maybe tomorrow?
Sure, I said, and hurried up to catch my mom. Charlotte stayed for the week of Christmas, and that week was one of the best weeks of my life. We skated on the pond. We were only allowed a little portion of it, until most of the kids went home. We had snowball fights, explored the creek and forests around the town. Things could not have been better. Until she wanted me to come out on Christmas night. My parents were against it from the moment I said anything.
You can't.
My mom said. She was at the sink cleaning up Christmas dinner. Dad sat at the table, finishing his wine. Why not? She goes back home tomorrow and we just want to play some more.
Your mom is right. You can't go out tonight, Gregory.
He stood slowly and removed a key from his pocket. It was an old iron key that fit the lock for the attic. He frowned as he stared at it.
You know why.
But it's not fair! I finally make a friend and I can't even see them before they leave?
We're sorry.
My mom said as the plates clanged into the sink. Her shoulders were up, and she took a deep, shuddering breath.
But you can't.
This is bullshit! I said, and saw them both stare at me with wide eyes. I stomped out of the room. I wish I was never born! I went to the attic before they came to get me. Night had fallen heavy over the house. By the time Dad had his flashlight out and climbed the stairs, he followed the beam of light in and stopped at the top of the stairs. I could see in the reflective light that he had a sad look on his face, which for some reason hurt more than not being allowed to go.
All set.
I adjusted the collar around my neck. The weight of the metal was biting into my collarbone. I then lifted up the chain and held the collar up. He nodded and came over to me. He put the lock in the collar and turned the key. He then bent down and hugged me.
I really am sorry, Gregory. Maybe you can visit her in the summer. I wouldn't mind making the drive wherever she is.
Okay, I said, still angry. But there was no point in arguing. He got up, patted my head, and I saw my mom at the stairs. She gave a tiny wave, but didn't come into the attic. She never could. I just stared at her, until she turned and went down the stairs, followed by my dad. The attic door squeaked shut, and the sound of the lock clicking closed echoed in the chill. I leaned back against the wall and stared at the ceiling, waiting. 5 years of it happening had trained me well on what to expect, and soon I was able to move around the attic freely. Well, at least the length of the chain on the wall. I smelled her before I heard her. We had hugged a number of times, and the scent of her shampoo, and just her, was embedded in my senses. The doorbell rang, a sound that made my ears hurt, and I covered them with my arms. My dad was talking to Charlotte. Soon after, I heard her climbing the side of the house, breathing heavily and cursing all the way. I snorted at the thought of her trying to check on me. I didn't think any excuse would get Charlotte to leave without seeing me. I made my way to the circular window, pressed my nose against the glass, and shivered at the cold. Snow fell heavily outside, and I could smell people walking along the road. A gnawing hunger rose in the pit of my stomach. I licked my lips at the thought of what a meal they would make. I heard a clang of metal outside, but couldn't see the cause anywhere. Charlotte's face appeared at the circular window, and it startled me. I gave a barking yelp and backed away, my long nails scraping against the floorboards. She stared through the fogged-up glass, her eyes wide. I backed away to the shadows as she gave a wide grin and pushed on the glass. It opened with a blow of snow and cold, and it rippled through my hair.
This is what they meant?
She asked as she stuck her head in. She slowly pulled herself up the rest of the way and stood before the glass. The familiar hunger rose up, but I stomped it back down, using my surprise to keep myself distracted.
I thought they were insane, but it's true.
I couldn't say anything. My mouth wasn't working, and my tongue could only hang outside of my mouth. The grin she wore grew as she found a stool in the corner and sat down on it.
You're a werewolf.
My entire body jerked at the word. My parents never used it. Only people in town could use it in whispers as I passed. It was an insult to me, and Charlotte seemed to pick up on it, and rose her hands in a placating gesture.
Sorry, I didn't mean anything by it. You gonna eat me?
The hunger was there and growing, but I shook my head. She went to stand, but I dropped to all fours and stalked around her, staying out of the moonlight that poured from the windows.
I know I shouldn't have come, but I had to know. The kids around here, they talked about you like you were a devil or cursed by Jesus himself. I'd heard about you for years, but I never got a chance to meet you. Can you even talk?
Hard.
The word came out as if I had stuffed my mouth with sand.
Never.
Never had anyone to talk to? Not even your parents?
Her eyes narrowed, and the smile disappeared.
Sorry, but do you eat people?
I shrugged. I never had before. But the desire was there in that hunger. The same desire I felt with her sitting there. I wanted to rip her throat out. And yet the idea caused such a well of pain inside that it stopped me. She stood slowly, her hands out as she crossed the distance to me. She looked at the chain and collar with disgust, then held her hand out as if to pet me. I moved forward and let her. The blade sunk deep before I reacted. The pain came in, a searing wave, and I jerked back, tearing fur from my head where she had grasped. My right arm wouldn't move easily, as the blade had slipped between the joint. I used my legs to leap away from her, and stared in disbelief as she ducked her hand into her jacket again. The blade she pulled out looked far too long, and almost like the surface of water, with how it shimmered in the moonlight.
Quicker than I expected. Pa said you're like her, but I really didn't understand.
I growled at her, while I tried my best to make sense of what was happening. She seemed to notice my confusion and grinned, the devil in her face.
Come on, I'm not that good of an actor.
She said, and flipped the knife in her hand.
Or did you really believe that I was your friend? There are no friends of werewolves, Greg. Your parents should have snuffed you out at the first sign of change. I'm just Charlotte. Well, maybe I'm a little bit more.
She walked smoothly around me, moving like someone far older.
I'm a hunter. You are to be my first prey. Grandpa's been watching you for years. He's the one that chose you for my first kill. You should feel honored. I know I do.
I growled again and snapped at her. She jerked only slightly and recovered after only a moment. She chuckled.
The collar almost feels like cheating. Come over. I'll take it off for you.
She knelt down and motioned her hand like one would do to call an unknown dog. I jumped at her, the hunger and betrayal mixing into a terrible kind of anger. She darted back, the claws in my left hand just coming up short. She backed through the door as my chain didn't let me go that far. She frowned and flipped the blade again. She then threw it at me. I just barely dodged it, and the tip embedded itself into the wood of the floor with a thud and a twang. My anger rose, and I started to pull at the chain. I knew it was weak, as I had torn it partly out of the wood last year, and being afraid of getting in trouble, I put it back into the post the best I could before Dad came to release me. The nails screamed from the wood as I pulled with all my strength, and finally they broke free. I tumbled across the floor and slammed into the wall beside her. She took her chance, a new blade in her hand, but I was up on my feet faster than she expected. I swung and hit her mid-body with my left hand. She went flying across the room and hit the post I had once been chained to. She dropped with a cloud of dust and a round of coughs as she struggled to get to her feet. A faint laugh escaped her.
There we go. Now things are getting interesting.
She staggered to her feet. There was a cut on her forehead that bled down into her right eye. She wiped at it, and then charged me. She had practiced fighting my kind. I had never been in a real fight in my life. It was only instinct and luck that kept her blade from finding purchase. In only moments I was covered in 100 stinging cuts. I was breathing heavily while she stood back, and looked like she had only jogged down the street.
Just die already. Do everyone a favor. You're gonna kill someone. Maybe your parents. Maybe you'll break out one night and eat some poor woman. It's gonna happen, so just die before it does.
I had considered her words many times since I had started to change, but I couldn't agree with them. My parents loved me and would be heartbroken if I died. She was right, though. I would kill at some point, and I wanted her to be my first kill too. I dove at her, the cold air feeling like pins in the cuts across my face and shoulders. She tried to dodge out of the way, but I landed short and pushed off again to catch her. She screamed as I knocked her to the ground and clamped my mouth around her face. It was over in a sickening crunch and a gurgle. I ate that night. Ate until the sun was up and I transformed back to my normal self. Charlotte's body laid as just gore in a square of sunlight. I was covered in her blood, and my mom screamed when she came with my dad to release me. Everything changed then. That hunger that only came out during the change was now with me at all times. And when Christmas came, the hunger was unbearable. We had moved a few towns over after Charlotte's death, and the attic of the new house wasn't nearly as good as the house before. I escaped and killed my parents when I was 16, and have been traveling ever since. I can't lock myself up anymore on Christmas. It doesn't work. So I try to stay as far away from people during that time as I can. But the wolf has other ideas. Somehow I can travel miles and miles to find a meal, so as a warning to you all, if you hear a noise downstairs on Christmas, don't assume it's Santa. It could be one of my kind. It could be me.
You could be my next Christmas dinner.